Athletes. Houston, Texas delivered.
You are Locked On Huskers, your daily podcast on the Nebraska Cornhuskers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey gang, DP here, Locked On Huskers. Thank you for making Locked On Huskers your first watch and listen each and every single day. And for this Thursday morning, thank you for you folks who lock in every day and get this Huskers talk. You everydayers, thank you very much for what you do. Need to thank our sponsors, the folks from Birddogs, Mark Ronweiler. If you would please let them know about Birddogs.
Thank you, DP. This episode of Locked On Huskers is brought to you by Birddogs. Now, Birddogs are the shorts that are designed to make you look good. They're stretch khaki shorts, fit slimmer through the thigh and the leg to give you a truly sculpted look. They do the exact same thing as those more expensive brands, but they fit way better. They're not made of that stiff, restricting cotton. They fix the issue by inventing a cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki, but stretches, so you get that slimmer fit that everybody wants without having to sacrifice movement. Birddogs uses anti-stink, sweat-wicking fabric that keeps you cool and dry all year long. So go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege and enter the promo code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, for a free Yeti-style tumbler with your order. That's birddogs.com/lockedoncollege for a free Yeti-style tumbler. You won't want to take the Birddogs off, I promise you. DP, back to you.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it. And we thank, again, the folks from Birddogs. If you have not subscribed to Locked On Huskers, please do so. Click the button, get the alerts, and get the content. Greatly appreciate it. Yesterday, I had an opportunity to talk about the camps in Houston, the free camp in Houston, Texas, for Nebraska football, for Matt Rhule and this coaching staff to go down and actually get eyes on, get face-to-face with some of the top-level talent in Houston, Texas. And they came far and wide from the state of Texas to Houston. Had the opportunity to talk to several coaches who had players who were attending the camp, and several coaches who have actually coached the players or coached against the players that we're about to talk about today. And there are a couple of different dimensions, different levels to talk about, because there are players who wanted to be at this camp to get in front of them, players who were invited into the camp, and then players who were invited, but they weren't really expected to participate, but they wanted their presence there so they could get to know and communicate and talk to Husker football coaches. So through that, it's a big deal to talk about it. Now, there are a couple of players, 4 and 5 stars, that Andrew Marsh from Katy, Texas, may be the best football player in the state of Texas, high school football player. Like, maybe. And it's just, if he's not number one, the roll call is pretty short before we hear his name. A wide receiver, there's also Quinnell Farrakhan, who is from the Woodlands High School, the mighty Highlanders of the Woodlands, and I'm familiar with that because I lived in the Woodlands and coached in the Woodlands. So Farrakhan, this is an elite, gifted athlete. Now, Marsh at 6'5", Farrakhan is 6'4", both at about 185, anywhere from 185 to 195. Both sub 4.5 40s, both long, athletic, probably ready. Nebraska ready. Lots of work in camps, and well coached, extremely well drilled in the mechanics of high-level football and being prepared and set up and ready for Division I football. But they did not compete or participate in the free event. They were there, but actually getting boots on the ground and hands-on, no, that wasn't what they were there for. They were there to have these conversations. Now, the Woodlands, by Nebraska standards, if you think wow, actually, I'll have to have that conversation with myself. To compare, the Woodlands High School is just an amazing program. They play in a 20,000 seat stadium. Tons of Division I players. If you think of the name Winfield, a round one NFL draft pick from Minnesota. He's an alumnus of the Woodlands High School. They produce, and he's not the only one, but they produce. The 7-on-7 camps in the area from Fort Bend to the northern areas of Houston, there's enough talent that there are no easy wins at this level. So for Marsh and Farrakhan to elevate themselves to receivers 1A and 1B, or 1B and 1C, depending on how you look at it, for Nebraska to be able to at least draw their attention to the camp is a huge statement and a huge applause to Matt Rhule and his coaching staff. These are the ones and twos. These are the folks that, okay, everybody wants. And so the fact that they answer the phone call, or they answer the text, or they answer the email, and they come to a Nebraska event, then my goodness gracious, you've done a great thing. But beyond that, then you get into a player like Damon Demas. And Demas, all of the receivers that we're talking about fall into a very finite area and type. When you say that Marcus Satterfield and Matt Rhule have a type going forward, this year's roster includes people built from statures like Billy Kemp IV, who is not the tallest, he's not the biggest, he's quick. But all of these receivers we're going to talk about today, and all these defensive backs, are long. 6'5" long, 6'3", 6'4", 6'5". All of them sprinters, all of them sub 4.5 40 guys, and sub 50 440 guys, 400-meter guys. So they have a type that they are programming and recruiting and trying to package: long, athletic, speed burner with some physicality wide receivers. Demas is, I believe he's currently enrolled in Garden City, but he played for Sam Parker at Tomball, and Sam Parker is a high IQ, high energy, high character coach. And if you play for Sam Parker, expectations are real about who you are off the field. Now, Demas has had some issue off the field, which led to him going from a top-level recruit to ending up at Garden State. But the reports that I get is that he's a new young man, that those things away from the field have been put down, and his focus is falling firmly on this next opportunity as a last chance opportunity. And if you're going to take that shot, now Nebraska fans, some of you cringed at the thought of that, and some of you applaud because you've been in those situations. Now, I can tell you it's not of the level of some of the things that Nebraska's had to deal with in recent history. It's not that deep, but it's enough for big programs to be concerned. But talking to the coaches from Tomball and from the Woodlands, what they said is, well, I asked the question, would you take a chance on this young man? And the answer was yes, quick. Then it was, is the talent worth the risk and reward? And all of them thought very much worth the risk and very much the reward. So circle Demas as a player of note and consideration, because it's a big part. That if you go and get in front of the young people and then you have those conversations, not only Nebraska's coaches with these young people, but Nebraska's coaches and their coaches, and then asking other coaches about players that played against them, there is a trust that happens in that space. So circle Demas. We'll take a break here. When we come back, there's a couple of folks who got those offers. I do want to talk about Braylon Prude. We'll start with him first, and he's quite the specimen. Lots to talk about here. Locked On Huskers. We'll be right back. Hey, gang, DP here. Thank you again for making Locked On Huskers the first watch and listen each and every single day on this Thursday. I hope you're having a fantastic Thursday. If you have not subscribed for this content, please pause the episode and subscribe. Let's get the content, get the alerts as well. And again, we thank the folks from Birddogs. I have to admit, I put on a pair just to be able to talk about it. And well done. I want to say this about the trip to Houston and the space that we're in. It's competitive for Matt Rhule to dive into, like, he didn't go fishing in a creek and is chasing, minnows with paper cups. This is deep sea fishing. You're amongst the big boys. And Houston is competitive. The money is good. Even at the high school level, the money is good. So you have to almost know that if you're going to Houston to recruit in large numbers and in large quality, that you better have your NIL packages ready and prepared. Because nobody we're talking about in this segment is coming for free, and they're coming without competition. Because they can play, they're athletic, they're not perfect. But if you can get either of these two players, and you fans that have been around me long enough, I just recruiting makes my head hurt. It just does, because you're spending a lot of time on young people who, if we're talking about Alabama or Georgia and you're talking about an offer being made, you pretty much can just write the check and check the box that they're going to end up at Georgia or Alabama. That's not the case for Nebraska. So we spend a lot of time casting your irons, throwing your bait into deep water, hoping that the whale lands, that your bait is good enough that the whale lands. And that's just not the case. Braylon Pruitt, listen, how many 6'5" defensive backs can you think of? How many 6'5" or 190-pound defensive backs can you just rattle off the top of your brain? How many 6'5" defensive backs have come through Nebraska? Even at their apex, how many 6'5" defensive backs came through Nebraska? How many 6'5" safeties? How many 6'5" corners? How many 6'5"? Like, it's just not that many. Now, Javen Wright gives you some idea about the level of talent and the size that we're talking about. But how many Buddha Wrights are there? Well, Braylon, Hightower High School is it's a strong program. Cornelius Anthony is the coach down there, and his reputation carries throughout the state. It's not a Houston or a Katy type resume. This is a state of Texas and a program reputation that players that come out of there, they know the game, they take care of the game, which is the thing that was said about Pruitt, that he loves the game and he takes care of the game, that he respects the game. And it shows in his work. It shows in his film study. For them to call him a highly intelligent defensive back, oh my goodness, in the state of Texas, that man, put the cap and gown on, you graduate. But at 6'5", 190 pounds, sub 50-second, 400 meters, and physical. When you watch him on tape, what you see is the IQ, the computer chip activated. And you're watching him set up offensive players for failure because he's so athletically gifted that he can allow quarterbacks to think, to see an open spot in one of the 15 areas that he has to defend. He cuts off angles and sets angles at a high level. His route to the ball, he's always on time. And his ability and, quite frankly, his want to run through blockers to stop the play where it is, the ball where it is, rather than where he thinks it's going to be. He is a straight line run through defender at defensive back. And again, at 6'5", he's walking around at 190. But I would imagine him 2 years from now at about 205, 210. And that's a different conversation that you're having. And he's a 400-meter athlete. We're not talking about just a sprinter. Yeah, he's a sprinter. He's a sub 4.5 40. But when you're under 50 at 400 meters and you like hitting people and you're willing to do the film study and you recognize tendency, you can watch, he has smart eyes. So you can watch his head where he's setting quarterbacks up to make that long throw to the sideline that he can jump from 7 yards and still get to, because he's got the 6'5" stride to go with it. He's got the 6'5" length in his arms, and that allows him to get hands on receivers and still keep some distance. It allows him to hand battle with linemen because he's got the arm length that still keeps him separate from those tackles. But if he's apexing trips on the outside, he always seems to get to the right spot, no matter which of the triplets they go to, and no matter which one of those shields come through and try to block him. He's difficult to block. He's tough to block. Doesn't accept blocks. But if the rubber meets the road and he has to go through an offensive player, he's very adept at just simply running through offensive players. To watch him run, I watched 10 offensive plays just this morning just to see, and they were all run plays, to watch him on those 10 plays that he was actually successfully blocked once. And then he turned, pivoted, and made the play 7 yards downfield. He has some things to work on. Strength and leverage. It's one thing to have that length, but then being strong enough at 190 pounds in high school to forklift somebody back into the runner is one thing. If that's a 290-pound offensive lineman, you need to get up to 205, 210. But that's a thing that can be easily done. And a hard worker, yeah, I don't think that's going to be a problem. I think I've given you – Evan Cooper identified right away that, okay, this is a kid we need to offer. Doesn't mean you get him, but you make the offer, you're in the room with him, and at least getting him to acknowledge Nebraska as a program of note is a win. It's a win. We'll throw a break there, and when we come back, one other athlete I really want to spend some time with, and he's also from Katy, Texas. Lots to talk about. Van Keith Brown here at Locked On. Hey, gang. Hopefully this has been a good one. Put your comments down. If there's a player you want scouting report on that has been offered, put them down in the comments. If there's a player that you have questions about, please do so. Go ahead and put them in the comments, and I'll get to them, and we will talk about them in future episodes of Locked On Huskers. Thank you for making this a part of the day. Van Keith Brown. Again, to mention Katy as a football factory, it would just think Metro Nebraska. Only multiply it by 400%. Size, quality of athletes, a lot of legacy players, folks who have played Division I football, affluent area, Katy and Allen, two of the prominent, always make it to state Texas finals or areas, producing mass amounts. You're talking about, I don't know, Kyler Murray. Nebraska fans think, I don't know, Bryce Matthews. That level of athlete constantly coming out of this vacuum in North Houston and in the state of Texas. Well, and go with me here. If you've heard 6'5", 190 pounds at a skill position, that's Van Keith Brown. This is a 10. I was told a couple of different times, but in the vicinity, in the neighborhood of 10-5, 100 meters. Just for that. Sub 4.5 40, as a matter of fact. I believe he's a 4.45 40 guy. Those talking terms of long, athletic, fast, physical, and then his value has been set because Cal's at the table, Kansas State's at the table, and it's a different. Remember, if you had said that 2 years ago, Cal and Kansas State doesn't really bother Nebraska being at the table with. But circa this year, Kansas State has some leverage. They actually have some juice. And they have some recent history of being able, and I want to point this out. Imagine you're Matt Rhule. Imagine that you're recruiting in a place that you're familiar with, and then they talk about the people that you're competing with, because that's always a part of the conversation. Who else is at the table? Who else is interested? Who else are you talking to? Who else is interested in you? Well, be careful about asking somebody, because they'll tell you. And in this case, it's Kansas State. Now, the Cal part speaks to intelligence, that Cal's coming to the table, which means this young man has his ducks in a row and he's handling his academic business. Cal's not even getting to the table if they don't have some proof that you're not going to come to Berkeley and flunk out. Like, they don't want to spend the money on that sort of wasted talent. But Kansas State, when it becomes, well, listen, there's a couple of really good players from Nebraska who chose Kansas State over Nebraska recently. Good ones. Really good ones. And oh, by the way, look what they did with us. Like, we did some things. You want to talk about Kansas State's bowl appearance? You want to talk about Nebraska's? Oh, that's right. You can't. This is a thing that Matt Rhule and his coaching staff is going to have to deal with. Right? You're going to have to deal with it. And when you fish in deep water with this kind of talent, you have to have an answer for why Nebraska over Cal and Kansas State. But the offers are in place. And now we get to watch. I can say that, so I knew David Hicks, who is their current interim coach, and then Lonnie, they had a head coach who stepped down, and then David Hicks is the interim. But again, good program, good coaching. Look, Nebraska's fishing in deep water. If they land one, it's a good day. You only need one picture of one masterpiece. Of the 6 players mentioned, add Ramel Stevens to another 6'6", 190-pound wide receiver. Sounds familiar. If you can get one of them, and I would actually circle Demas as the guy that most likely, because he has the most at risk. But if Matt Rhule and company can actually land any of the 6, the trip was well worth it. That'll do it for this Locked On Huskers. We'll close with the 3 words we love so much. Go Big Red.